The air smelled of pine and defiance as I stood on the porch of my cabin. The lake glinting like a sheet of polished silver under the Montana sun. My boots scuffed the weathered wood. The same boards my grandfather laid down 60 years ago when he carved this place out of the wilderness. This was my land, my blood, my home. But the letter in my hand, crisp, white, and reeking of bureaucracy, told a different story. The HOA, those vultures in pressed suits, wanted me gone. They claimed my cabin, my sanctuary, was an eyesore that tanked their precious property values. They wanted to bulldoze it, replace it with some cookie-cutter McMansion for a tech bro from Seattle. I crumpled the letter, my knuckles white, my breath hitching in my chest like a trapped animal. They thought they could push me out. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I'm Jack Ramsey, 42, a man who'd rather skin a deer than shake hands with a lawyer. I'd lived here on Lake Whisper for a decade, ever since I left the Army and swore I'd never let anyone control me again. The lake was my church, its ripples a hymn, its fish my congregation. But the HOA led by Karen Whitaker, a woman with a smile like a rattlesnake and a clipboard she wielded like a guillotine, had other plans. She'd moved into the gated community across the lake 5 years ago, and ever since, she'd been hell-bent on civilizing this stretch of wild. First, it was complaints about my truck's oil stains. Then, my firewood stack was untidy. Now, they were coming for the whole damn cabin. The letter gave me 30 days to comply or face legal action. 30 days to erase my family's legacy. I tossed the paper into the fire pit, watching the flames lick it to ash, and made a vow. Karen wasn't getting my land. Not today. Not ever. The next morning, I drove my beat-up Ford into town, the engine growling like my mood. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and pancake syrup, the kind of place where locals swapped stories over greasy plates. I slid into a booth, nursing a mug so hot it scalded my palms, when I overheard 2 old-timers at the counter. Heard Karen's got the county in her pocket now. One said, his voice low, like he was spilling a secret. She's pushing to rezone the lake for community development. Wants condos. Jack. Condos. My stomach twisted. Condos on my lake. I could already see it, jet skis tearing through the water. Kids screaming. The quiet shattered. I left a 10 on the table and stormed out, the bell above the door jangling like a warning. Back at the cabin, I paced the creaky floorboards, my dog Rusty whining at my heels. The HOA's plan wasn't just about my cabin, it was about control. Karen wanted to turn Lake Whisper into her personal kingdom, and I was the last holdout. I could fight in court, but I had no money for lawyers, no fancy degree to match her word games. My eyes landed on the old hunting rifle above the fireplace. My grandfather's, its stock worn smooth by his hands. That's when it hit me, a spark. Sharp and dangerous, like a flint striking steel. If they wanted to play dirty, I played dirtier. I spent the next week digging. Not in the ground, but in the county records. Old maps. Anything I could get my hands on. The library smelled of dust and forgotten promises, the fluorescent lights buzzing like a swarm of bees. I found it on a Thursday, buried in a 1947 land survey. The lake itself wasn't zoned residential. It was unclaimed, a gray area in the county's books. My land bordered it, and my family had hunted and fished there for generations. I leaned back in the chair, a grin spreading across my face. Karen thought she could outmaneuver me. I'd turn her own game against her. Enter Maggie Teller, the wild card I didn't see coming. She showed up at my cabin on a rainy afternoon, her pickup rattling like it was held together by spit and prayers. Maggie was a wildlife biologist, mid-30s, with eyes like a hawk and a laugh that could cut through a storm. She'd been tracking the lake's ecosystem for years, documenting rare trout species that only bred in its depths. "Heard you're in a war with the HOA," she said, shaking rain off her jacket. "I'm not here to pick sides. But if they develop this lake, those fish are done for. I liked her instantly. Her boots were muddy, her hands calloused, her voice carrying the kind of conviction that comes from loving something bigger than yourself. She wasn't just a scientist. She was a fighter, and I needed one. Maggie and I hatched a plan over coffee that tasted like motor oil. The rain drumming on the cabin's tin roof. If I could register the lake as a private hunting reserve under an old state law, it would lock out development. No condos, no jet skis, no Karen. The catch: I had to prove historical use and ecological value, and I had 20 days left before the HOA's deadline. Maggie offered her data years of fish surveys, water samples, proof the lake was a biological gem. I offered my family's history, photos, hunting logs, stories of my grandfather teaching me to cast a line when I was 6. Together, we were a force. But the clock was ticking, and Karen wasn't sitting idle. She came for me at the next HOA meeting, held in the community center that smelled of lemon cleaner and smugness. Karen stood at the podium, her blonde bob perfect, her voice dripping with honeyed venom. "Mr. Ramsey's property is a blight," she said, clicking through a PowerPoint of my cabin like it was a crime scene. The crowd, mostly newcomers with manicured lawns, nodded like sheep. I stood up, my flannel shirt wrinkled, my voice rough as gravel. "This lake's been my family's for generations. You don't get to erase that because it doesn't match your aesthetic." A few locals clapped, but Karen's smile didn't waver. She had the county planner on speed dial, and I could feel the noose tightening. That night, I sat on the dock, the lake's surface like glass, reflecting a sky full of stars. Rusty curled up beside me, his warmth grounding me as doubt crept in. What if I lost? What if they took everything? The water lapped softly, a whisper of resilience, and I thought of my grandfather's voice. "This land's tougher than you, Jack. Don't let it down." I exhaled, my breath a ghost in the cold air, and made a choice. I wasn't just fighting for May, was fighting for the lake, for Maggie's fish, for every underdog who'd ever been stepped on by someone like Karen. The final piece fell into place when Maggie found a loophole in the county's environmental code. If we could prove the lake supported endangered species, development would be dead in the water. She worked through the night, her laptop glowing, her fingers flying over keys as she compiled data. I scoured my attic, unearthing a journal my grandfather kept in '62, detailing hunts and fish catches that proved the lake's unbroken use. We filed the application for the hunting reserve the next day, my hands shaking as I signed my name. The clerk, a tired woman with glasses perched on her nose, stamped it with a thud that echoed like a gavel. The showdown came at the county hearing, a room packed with suits and tension so thick it choked the air. Karen was there, her lawyer at her side, his briefcase gleaming like a weapon. She spoke first, her voice smooth as silk, painting a picture of progress, of community benefits. I stood, my heart pounding, and laid out our case, the lake's history, Maggie's data, the endangered trout. My voice cracked when I talked about my grandfather, about the cabin's creaky porch, the way the lake sang at dawn. Maggie backed me up, her charts and graphs a shield against Karen's glossy lies. The room was silent, the only sound the hum of the overhead lights. The county board deliberated for an agonizing hour. When they returned, the chairwoman, a no-nonsense rancher named Clara, cleared her throat. "Based on the evidence, Lake Whisper is hereby designated a private hunting reserve under Mr. Ramsey's stewardship, with protected status for its ecological value." The room erupted, locals cheering, Karen's face collapsing like a house of cards. She stormed out, her heels clicking like gunfire, but I didn't care. I hugged Maggie, her laugh ringing in my ears, and for the first time in weeks, I breathed easy. That night, I sat by the lake, a beer in hand, Rusty's head in my lap, The water shimmered under the moon, whispering its thanks. Karen's condos were dead, her power broken. The lake was safe, not just for me, but for the fish, the trees, the wild heart of this place. I'd fought for something bigger than myself and won. Sometimes, justice isn't a courtroom or a contract, it's the sound of water lapping against a dock. The smell of pine. The knowledge that you stood your ground and didn't let the bastards grind you down.